Thank you for organizing this seminar, and thanks for inviting me to present my ongoing work here on the city of Ludhiana. And as Professor Peter Molinga introduced, it is on water reforms, especially the new public management type of governance reforms which have been happening in India in the urban water sector. And it is slightly also in the science and technology studies context, which is I am very much novice in, but I am looking forward to your comments and suggestions. I'll begin. So Ludhiana is one of the biggest countries, biggest cities in the state of Punjab in India. You can look at a map to sense the location of the city. And unlike other cities in India, in cities of Punjab have been dependent on groundwater as a source of urban water supply or domestic water supply in general. Being the biggest and industrialized cities, Ludhiana is also produces a lot of pollution of different kinds. And one of the important and most critical issue is also groundwater pollution in the city of Ludhiana. And it is increasing because groundwater has been a principal source of water. If you look at the map, on the right side, you will see different colors, which tries to explain how city has grown since 1995. And with the growth of the city, the horizontal growth of the city, the groundwater supply system is also developed, mostly in a decentralized manner. So I would like to emphasize here that each of the neighborhood, as it developed in Ludhiana, the groundwater system also developed with that as an independent unit where resource was in local borewells in the neighborhoods, and also the zone of the water supply system were limited to the particular neighborhood. It approximately produces 530 million liters of day for water from its 658 deep tube wells and also some shallow tube wells. This is a huge network of pipeline of 1,639 kilometers and more than 200,000 domestic connections. So this city now has to go transition, and I'm going to talk about two transitions. The first transition is because groundwater is increasingly being polluted and it is unfit for drinking, they have to shift to a surface water system. So, and major issue of groundwater pollution, as I explained, the industry in Ludhiana also does a lot of reverse pumping of their industrial effluent. And also there are geogenic sources of contamination, which is causing disease. Many of you might have heard about the cancer trains which travel from Punjab to Rajasthan, carrying patients. So that is the issue and the graveness of the issue in Punjab in terms of the health and potability of water. Of course, there are also issues of agricultural pesticides and other things happening there, but this is also one of the contributing factor. So they need an alternative, and this transition has been thought of now in terms of shifting to a surface-based supply, where a canal which has been otherwise irrigating fields in Punjab will now be sourced for domestic and drinking water. And so there is first transition. The second transition is about to shift from an intermittent water supply to a continuous water supply regime, where unlike earlier systems, which are decentralized, segregated, but they also operated always in intermittent fashion, where you have 3 hours water in the morning and 3 hours water in the evening to the houses. But this system, the new system, would actually aim at providing water for continuously, which is a buzzword in India, which is called 24/7. So it's 24/7 water, and it doesn't just come as a policy choice. It brings lots of governance reforms. The core of the governance reforms is to have an efficient system, financially self-sustainable. That means entire operation and management cost of the system has to be borne from tariff. So you have to have a cost reflective tariff. So with all this, we can have more questions on the reforms after I finish. But there is another program in India. One is the JNNURM, the National Urban Renewal Mission, and second is Smart Cities Program. So, and a pilot project for 24/7 water supply has been taken up in Ludhiana on the basis of that. So the problem here is this transition is stuck. This has been resisted from the ground and stalled, while the push from the top is still constant and the bottom level resistance is equally persistent. So It is neither moving ahead, it is not going back. And if I look at it from, I'm using the STS, one of the STS frameworks called multi-level framework here by Gills 2004. This has been, I'm looking at this 24/7 experiment at a pilot scale as a niche experiment. So the problem has to be explained, and I'm trying to look at this problem from STS perspective. So the focus of the research is how I assume I also try to unpack how certain kinds of practices which are present in the groundwater-based regime are actually form certain behavioral patterns which are actually resisting this transition of both the transitions, ground to surface as well as intermittent to 24/7. I use the STS context here. The way STS scholars refer the technology as socio-technical system to emphasize that technology doesn't only depend on, just a moment. Yeah, technology design, development, implementation, diffusion, adoption and upgradation and use happen in a social context. So here urban water supply system is a socio-technical system. I also try to look at materiality. That means the various components of the objects or elements of the urban water supply system and what do they allow and what do they do not allow. And then try to look at how those have actually shaped certain kinds of practices. So socio-technical entanglement, human artifact relationship, and assemblage of practices is the contextual framework which I use for explaining this transition and its stranded situation. So in terms of landscape, regime and niche, the MLP framework, if we briefly understand the pre and post-reform period, the reform started in India after 2010, especially in the urban water sector. Landscape, I looked at mainly the policy changes, the state responsibility in the pre-reform area where state is responsible for water supply, the groundwater water-based access with municipal supply, but it is always combined with self-provisioning because government systems are unreliable. So people have their own bore wells, they access their own water, and they have their own purification units fixed at home. And so these two systems basically coexist. But if you look at it from the niche point of view, the way city grew and the borewell-based system grew in the city, it was quite decentralized, and in one way it is manageable to keep with the pace of the growth of the city. After reforms, everything has to be centralized because the water has to be sourced from surface canal, and this entire groundwater-based systems is going to be discarded. It's a huge capital expenditure and big ticket project on one hand, funded by World Bank with reforms, conditionalities, and also the flexibility in the groundwater-based system would be lost, and the dependence would be more on the entire centralized governance mechanism with the municipal council. So I try to unpack the different components of the water supply system using the materiality and material agency lens and try to explain in this table that how it leads to certain kinds of events leads to certain kind of descriptions, and especially where we see water supply system in the city at a micro level, both as coexistence of networked infrastructure as well as non-networked infrastructure. Here networked is because these are public systems, public bore wells, valves operations, operator operates that and it turns certain valve with rotations to release or channelize water to certain zones where, so these are all different components. Basically, I'm trying to show here in terms of what is doable in water supply system, then pipes and service reservoir, and how it results in unequal supply. So public borewell or valve operations or condition of the pipes, if those are degraded or leaking, or service reservoir capacity, if it is also leaking, all can be manipulated by the operators. That is a central point which I'm trying to make here. And that manipulation is highly politicized, which results in unequal supply, unreliable supply, insufficient supply. But this particular, if you look at from the artifact or materiality or material agency point of view, this is what it allows. This kind of allows the operators to play with the system. So it is not that the way you design the system will always deliver the water in the way it has been designed. It is quite fluid in nature, the way actually it operates on the ground. But this then also leads a non-networked independent system of water supply, water access, I would say, not supply, where you have a private borewell with an electric motor and home water filter, which allows people to compensate with the shortfalls from the public system. and hence it gives a different kind of access and control over how much water can be extracted, filtered, and used at a domestic level. And this has been the pattern which has created these disruptions. Now, these disruptions have created certain patterns of behavior, certain comfort areas, certain politics, certain network interest in the entire operations, where the local management, local contractors, municipal officials, politicians have found their spaces to basically satisfy their interest. Now, this would change with a new system, which would be the centralized system. I'm using here again the multi-level framework to show the actors and try to use the term called multi-level actor networks, which are actually involved in certain behavioral patterns which are resisting this transition. So I won't explain all of these arrows and linkages. I'm just showing this as a background and quickly move ahead. And I found in this, so the resistance is basically coming from bottom at the regime level, at the city level, which is basically because of the existing interest networks are not finding their space in the new imagined transition. So the local contractors will lose their jobs, the licensed plumbers will lose their jobs, companies will come and take over the entire system. Those would be much more profit oriented. Politicians are going to make this as an issue because tariff is going to increase. And if groundwater is going to be regulated, then people will be forced to draw water or receive water only from the transition surface-based system. So if I start from the bottom, the network type 4, where local politicians, local contractors, local political workers are trying to sustain their interest, which they do not see in the transition system. So that is mainly one resistance. But still we have the same problem. I'm trying to explain here the stalemate, or I'm trying to explain here the standard situation of this transition. Despite that, there is push of the reform from the above and there is resistance from the below. Why this has been there? This situation has been like that for last 10 years in Ludhiana, 8 years in Ludhiana. So in between, other networks like network type 1, which I found, where key political leaders and having connections across the political parties have larger exchanges about why this situation should continue like this. And they, despite their political party barriers, come together and try to negotiate with companies, World Bank, consultants, and have their own shares, informal shares. I don't want to use here the term corruption per se, but certain kinds of exchanges, I would say. The second type of network I see there as bureaucrats across the tiers of the government, which would say that if I make this 24/7 possible, great, I will have an upward mobility. But if I cannot make it happen on the ground, still I have something to draw from the system in terms of my own interests. So they will look for these kinds of experiments for their own upward mobility. The third network, which is very important, which is horizontal and vertical mix at the 3 levels, politicians, bureaucrats, private consultants, private companies, they will have gains. If there is one company which is not serving, they will try to throw that company out and bring another company to in. And in each of the negotiations, there would be some deals and some exchanges happening over there. So the standard situation basically is this, where the resistance is also coming. And always what I try to make, what the argument I'm trying to make here is that
5 minutes.
No, I'm done. This is the last point. So I'm trying to make the argument that despite this, we see that there is a resistance. Despite we generally associate resistance with the anti-privatization movements, or we try to see that how the local movements or right to water movements or critical researchers actually try to bring the state back and try to mobilize themselves for claiming the public water. Here, it is not the case. It is not the people who are resisting. It is certain interest configurations within the system which are trying to maintain the status quo and trying to reap the benefits from that. So still, this particular experiment of water supply, a 24/7 water supply in Ludhiana is stranded. It has been stranded for last 8 years. It has not been cancelled. And every time they are bringing in new consultant, every time they are trying to revive the project, and people are happy with their own self-provisioning modes. They are happy with their behavior. They do not believe in the system. And I think this particular situation, we don't know. It's unpredictable when the stalemate is going to break. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for the opportunity, and we are open for the questions.